Welcome back to Stu Structures. We're here for video 12 now, isn't it? In the series of building the coaling tower, so stay tuned. So welcome back, and welcome to all my new subscribers out there. I appreciate you subscribing to my channel. We are going to continue on with the coaling tower. We got all the platforms built and some of the pre-made stairwells built for all of the open platforms and stairs that come down and ladders around this building from the top all the way down to the ground. So, we're getting the plastic in now for all the handrails and all that. So we're just going to jump into this and see how far we can get in this video. Let's go with it. Now, I've showed these pictures before, but remember the first two pieces of this I kind of have halfway together, from this upper door and down this side to that second door, and then on down to where it wraps around the corner. I previously had started these. Now remember, I removed the handrails that I had on these before. I just didn't like them the way they were. And then, it wraps on around this back of this building, and there's two platforms here with a ladder in between them. And then that one piece comes on down to the top of where the coal and the sand is loaded into the tower. And that landing there has a stairway then that turns and goes down to a door just off of that. And then that comes down to the roof of that concrete building I built, and then turns and goes on to the ground from there. Now here's, I did get my supplies in. This 20 by 40 plastic is what I really wanted to use for the handrails. And this other stuff is just, the stuff that I didn't have that I thought it would come in handy. So to begin with, this 2x3, I'm going to come through and just cut tons of stanchions. Yeah, and these are just, right about 3 foot long, and I just use the chopper so I can get every one of them exactly the same size, and I just cut a bunch of them to start out with. And then that very top assembly, I just start coming back and adding the stanchions into them. The stanchions, the way they are 90 degrees from the stair, to me just seems odd, but that is the way they are in the picture, so I'm going to return those back the way they were, although these handrails are a little more substantial and a lot better than the handrails that were on there originally. In the ends, I just have to do some returns on the handrails to get the angles right at the very end so that they make sense where they meet the other black existing handrails. And I just come through and do all of that. I add these to the very, bottom of it to where it meets that door. I needed a return and some handrails so people didn't fall down in the gaps. And I had to add this white plastic piece to the very end of it as well so it could mount to that other stair. And then, between the two sets, there's this little tiny piece in between on that flat landing. And I just put all this in place. And, and now it's ready for paint at this point in time. And all these joints, when I put these on here with glue, it evaporates so fast, but it gives me a good tack. And then I just come through and start, gluing them over and over and over. Now you can see above that door on that second landing down, there's a light there. There's several lights on this building. There's a couple over the bays here. It's hard to see in this picture, but they're there. And there's actually some over the coaling chutes and a couple of other places in the building. Now I do have these two different types of lights. The ones on the right are from Tichy. I'm not sure who the ones on the left were from, but I have plenty of these, and they're more typical to the ones that were on there. So I'm going to come through and just clean up all of these parts and get the the sprue marks off of them and cut them and clean them up. And I'm going to come back through and just mount these into the tops of all the lights like this and glue them all into place. Originally I thought about drilling a hole into the building to put these into, but I'm going to change that as well. So I came back and put black paint on all those, and I end up cleaning just the very, tiny bit off the back end of all these so that they'll glue in. And I come through and just put a tiny bit of white paint on what is the bulb that was molded into these. They were kind of molded in a silver styrene, so I didn't bother painting the reflective area on the back side of that. Now, to mount these in the wall, I've got this real thick plastic, and this strip is already cut to about the width I want. So there's 11 lights, so I'm going to come back and mark 11 in these squares like a junction box. Because these would have been mounted in junction boxes on the outside, and there would have been conduit to run the wire in all the way around the outside of the building to match all these. And once I, have those marked to the size I want, I find a drill bit that's the same exact size, well, maybe just a hair bigger than those lights are on the back side, because they're going to go into this plastic. And in the center of every one of these squares, I'm just going to come back and drill a hole that those lights will go down into. Now I'm drilling all these holes before I cut the plastic parts because it's just so much easier to do it this way than cut all the squares apart versus do it the other way, because you just not be able to hold the little tiny squares to drill in them at that point. And some of them are slightly off center, but they're close enough. So I come back and cut the long strip with all these squares in it, and then I come back and cut all the squares individually. So now I have all those squares to work with. Now I don't want to paint these silver after I've had the lights glued down into them. So, I just take those outside and glue them or tape them onto a paint board. And I also paint or just take a bunch of round stock, the smallest round stock that I have, because I need tons of conduit. And I just spray paint all these with a silver paint. And then I take the tape off and just tape it down to my board, and I start coming through and gluing all the lights. Kind of the bottom of the light is square to the junction box. Now I need to mount one and work with part of this before I get that first handrail assembly mounted, because this and this conduit that comes off of that goes down in behind where the stairs mount to this door, and that's why I jumped ahead to go ahead and do all these lights and get them ready, because I didn't want to do this after I painted this and mounted this handrail to the door. But this is the whole first assembly after I've got paint on it and glued into place. Now I have to come back and add the angle supports and everything to that, but basically at least it's on the building. And here's another quick trick. These coaling chutes would have been scarred from all the cold, and you've seen a lot of bare metal, and I just come through with a pencil and just mark these to where they look like they've had coal sliding down the chutes. Now I'm going to continue adding more lights around more of the building where they go, and I'm mounting these two over the coaling chute area. I take more of this conduit that I had pre-painted, and from each of those lights, I'm not sure how this actually ran. The pictures I have were not very good pictures, but I'm just going to run a piece from each of these lights down to where I can run a horizontal run for all these lights and carry these on around the building. So I glue this down to the bottom there, and I glue one on the other one too, and then I take a small piece and run it all the way across the bottom, and I have these, at least what looks like the conduit, going to these lights at that point. Now, there would have been other junction boxes in the conduit, so I'm just coming back and making some of these without holes in them to use as junction boxes in the conduit as well. And I just paint these silver and bring them back in and, take them off the paint. Now I have a bunch of junction boxes to use as well. Then I come back and just start mounting more of the lights in areas around the buildings where they would have went. There would have been two over this wide bay and then one over this narrow bay. Later on, I do see the lights had moved from time to time, but I think these are how they were originally. And once the boxes are mounted, I start to come back and start adding conduit in here. And you can see the first piece glued in between the two boxes on this end. Now I'm jumping back and forth and working on several things, and the platform that goes on top of that concrete building that I built, I need to have a way to mount it on the building. So I found this, 90-degree angle styrene, and I'm coming back and cutting 4 legs for the corners of that for the platform. And once I have those, these wouldn't have just sat on top of the building like this. They would have had a small plate that they mounted on that would have probably been bolted to the top of the concrete. None of the pictures I have really show this plainly. I'm just guessing at this and making up something that I think would have worked. So I cut 4 squares to put underneath those angles. And you know, I go ahead and scrape the paint off of these so they get good glue adhesion, because the for sale signs that I use, you know, have just paint on them. And I come back and I glue those angles to the top of all those squares. And I just, you know, set them on the building once or twice and cut the heights of the angles to the desired height that I thought that I needed. And then I come back and glue those under the platform, paint everything black, and then I can mount that to the end of this platform. Now I did have to play with this a little bit, and I'll explain that, but now I need to come back and make the stair that goes off of that before I go too much further and get, you know, handrails started. So I cut these stairs, and I just cut a piece of styrene for the bottom of it to look like it went down to a concrete landing. On top of the stairs, I glue this piece here, which allows me to get glue adhesion between the stairs and the building itself. And I come back, and you know, you saw in the previous building how I started adding the handrails on this for the stairs. And once those are on, I'm letting those dry up, and I just keep coming back and putting another once or twice a dab of glue on each of those joints again. And I come and go ahead and do the handrail stanchions on the platform on top of that building as well. And then I add the stairs onto the front of it. And each time I do another step, I do come back and just put a tiny bit more glue on each of those bases of those stanchions so that I can get good glue adhesion. And once I do that 2 or 3 times, they're really well put together. And then I come back and just, you know, glue all the handrails into place. Now they're kind of awkward where the stair makes the building, but you know, these are similar to some of the pictures I saw. I'm not sure how they actually were, but I thought, well, you know, this is going to work. So now we have the handrails on that building. And once I put some black paint on it, you know, I left a little bit of the white side showing on that one side where the stairs that come down from the building to this building will glue onto there. And I still need to add concrete onto that, or concrete paint onto the concrete at the bottom, but basically that's that end of it done. And I showed this secondary piece of this stairwell last week and how I added these other platforms onto the end of that. So now we need to come back and just add the stanchions and handrails onto this as well. And I'm just getting these started. This isn't finished this week, but you know, that's where I stand at this point in time. Now the building, or the stair that goes up to that building, the way it meets that stairs up above the door on my building is slightly in a different place. So I had to move where it lands on this building, and I'm going to have to make that platform up there a little wider underneath that door to get that to work. And you can see where this, you know, where the corner of the coaling tower is. There's a ladder on this back side that goes up that coaling tower as well. Now it does have a small platform across the back side of this, and I have no pictures at all that really show what's going on back here. So, you know, I'm just going to make something up and use a little bit of artist license. And what I'm going to do is just have this as to where the power from, you know, supplies comes into the building to supply power for the whole building. And all my conduits and everything will come into a main power box that comes off the main lines that come to the building right here above this platform. And that gives me a reason for it being there, so I'm going to go ahead and add that on to the building. So there you have this week's segment of building the coaling tower. You know, I did get a fair amount done in this video. It takes a while to do the stanchions and handrails. You know, one of the keys though to making it long lasting and less fragile is every time you glue a joint, work 2 or 3 joints ahead and then come back and re-glue it. And maybe re-glue it a third time and a 4th time even. You know, when I initially do the light bond on those, it does weld them on there. But you know, it doesn't take much to break them or move them, you know, free. And if I come back and re-glue each of those joints 2 or 3 times, especially the ones that are really fragile joints, you know, where things meet that aren't good substantial joints, it really makes for a good solid bond. That upper handrail, now that it's on the building, I could handle that building by, you know, the building and that handrail. and you know, it's not going to break anything. It's really pretty substantial. So that's what I'm looking for in all this type of build, and it just takes time to keep coming back and doing all that. You know, and adding that electrical system into this building, I mean, I originally had intended on just adding the lights, you know, into the building itself. And the more I looked at the photos, you know, I don't really have good photos that show fine detail and stuff, but I do see a lot of conduit going to these lights in several of the photos. So, you know, adding the conduit and the boxes and everything to the outside of the coaling tower was just the way to go with this, and it adds so much more detail into the building and adds interest there. You know, it looks like it would have been functional. That's my whole purpose of all these. And I think by adding on that back side in that corner, you know, a power distribution system for the building and the main power lines coming into the building from there, and all the conduits would have ran to that point to power the whole building, just makes sense. I really don't know what that platform was for on the back side of that building. It may have been for this, but I have no pictures or plans or anything that show anything on that back wall, other than I can see signs that there was a platform back there and the ladder going up to it. So to me, just taking a little bit of, you know, artist license to go ahead and do this with that building just makes sense. And the one door that's real close to that, you know, on like the second floor level there, the landing on that, when I made this concrete building down below, the stair that comes from that landing down to the building roof just wasn't going to line up properly, so that the cables would have went between that building and the concrete cooling tower. So I had to shift where that landing is going to be on that door up there a little bit. The door is pre-positioned as part of the original kit that I had bought, and it's not in the same exact place as the one on the B&O Tower in Grafton. So what I'm going to have to do is that platform next to that door, I'm going to have to lengthen that just a little bit and slide the stairs coming off of that back just a little bit to come down to that building, so that it makes sense and I don't have to offset the building into part of the railroad tracks that would have been down there in that lower end. So, you know, I mean, it just would make sense to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You know, and we've still got a ways to go with all this. I would have thought by now maybe we'd be done with the coaling tower, and I keep adding more and more thoughts into this and going further and further with it. I mean, I still have to go back and paint the mullions in all those windows so they're not quite as bright and shiny as they are right now. You know, but it's coming along really nicely, and I think when it's done, it's going to be really a great looking building, and it's something I would be proud to have on my model railroad once I get to that point. So in any case, thank you for coming back and sharing this time with me. Thanks to my new subscribers. Share this content out there with others in the hobby. You know, it's all about convincing people just to try scratch building. That's all it's about. You don't have to do something this complicated. Just start out with something minor, grab some scratch building stuff, anything, and just scratch build something. And happy model railroading.